Hey everyone, wanted to do a overview 101 video on the Korg Triton VST as it's currently on sale for 99 bucks. And this, in my opinion, is probably one of Korg's best VST emulations of some of their old software ever. If you need a rompler just chocked full of 90s sounds, but with also a ton of potential for making very time relevant sounds, you can't go wrong. 100 bucks is a steal for this thing. Now, it can be a little confusing when you first dive into it, so hopefully I can walk through and give you guys some tips and again, just a high level overview of this. So if you're thinking of snagging the Korg Triton, this is a great video for you. Or if you've just bought it and you want to get a high level overview, this should be a good video for you. Now, when you open the Triton here, you're going to see 4 buttons at the top right. And these are some of the core sections of the Triton's architecture that are important to understand. First is global here, and this is just the global settings for the VST itself. This is an area where you'll probably only come in once when you first set it up. And you can do things like change the keyboard tuning, use custom scales, change the MIDI channels. One thing that is useful in here is the maximum number of voices. This jack it up as far as you can go. It maxes out at 256, but the more voices, the better, especially when you start building out some complex patches with the combination mode. You also have an output gain here where you can jack up the output if you find things are a little low in volume. That's a quick, easy way to do that. The next thing we have are these 2 buttons here, PROG and COMBI. So if I just click program here, you'll see we're brought to one of the default patches that loads up. And from here, I can just start editing this program right away. You'll see beneath this, I have a sub menu, easy, oscillator, pitch, filter, amp. These are the different screens where I can edit this actual program itself. And then on the left here, we basically have a master volume slider here. So if I wanted to drop the volume of this, maybe it was coming out too hot, I could do that very easily from there. And then I can also come over to the program here and do things like copy the program or just copy the oscillator. And then I could come into another program and just paste that in. So pretty handy right there. Now, the next button we have at the top is COMBI. And when I click that, you'll see the only thing that changed was this screen on the far left here. And this talks to or speaks to the difference between a program and a combination in the Korg Triton. And this holds true for really all of Korg's romplers back to the M1 in the late 80s. Let's go back to program here. A program is the simplest preset or patch level that you could create in a Korg Triton. And a program would be your typical program in really any other synth where you have an oscillator and all the tools you need to shape that sound. So pitch control, filters, amp envelopes, etc. A combination is a collection of up to 8 programs. So you'll see on the left-hand side of the screen here, we have 8 different slots, and each slot can hold a program. So as you can already imagine, the sounds you could get in combination mode are truly incredible when you stack up to 8 different programs within here. And you can get even more crazy with it where there are a lot of drum sounds in the Triton. So you could build a combination that has a bass patch, a keyboard patch, a drum patch, and you can make a song with just a combination. Now, the next thing to look at is the browse button here, and this lets us browse the different presets in the Korg Triton. And one thing to note is you will either be browsing the combinations or the programs based on the active button here. So COMBI selected, then I clicked browse. We can see COMBI browser. If I select program, then click browse, we'll see program browser at the top here. So super important to keep in mind whether you want to create a program or a combination, make sure you have the correct button selected here. Now let's start with browsing for a program here. So I'm going to select program and go to browse. And in the program browser, I can scroll through and just see everything within here. I can favorite things by just clicking the little star here, and then I could filter to just show my favorites. I can search over in the top right here to look for a very specific piano or sound. I can filter based on character. So do I want a mono sound that has a filter mod on it? And then over on the left, I have categories. So if I want a slow synth sound, I can select this and filter down just to see programs that match that category. Now at the top here, there are also different banks. So if I go to factory here, this is going to show me all the factory banks. If I go to EXB PCM, these are going to show me all the sounds associated with the different EXB PCM add-ons that the Korg Triton had. So the Korg Triton VST is based on an actual hardware unit from 1998, and they had these little PCM cards that you could physically install into the unit. They were basically preset packs, and so all of those preset packs are included in here. For example, Dance Extreme, if I just select that, it's going to show me all the programs from the Dance Extreme EXB PCM, so on and so forth. Then you have your general MIDI banks in here, and then user banks as well. You get 4 user banks, A, B, C, and D. So this is where you can actually store your custom sounds, 127 programs per bank, and that is the same for combinations as well. So the browser is going to work the same whether you're in COMBI or program mode. The only thing that changes are some of the categories in combination mode. And that's, I think, pretty much the core difference. So let's go back to program mode. Let's go to browse. Let's go to factory. Or actually, let's go category, and let's just pull up a acoustic piano. So I double click, it pulls up the patch. We can see the name up at the top here, acoustic piano. So let's start on the Easy tab here. And the Easy tab is really designed to be an easy way to edit a program. So I could go into the Oscillator tab, which will show me additional options, same with pitch, filter, etc. The Easy tab is a place where I can very quickly edit and sculpt my sound without having to click around on all those different sub-tabs. Let's start with the Oscillator here, and the Korg Triton in program mode can use 1 or 2 oscillators stacked up. So let's actually go ahead and click Oscillator here, and you're going to see this oscillator mode. So this is where I can define if I want to use 1 or 2 oscillators. We're currently in single mode. But if I click double, you'll see this oscillator 2 shows up down here. And if I go back to easy here, you'll see we have this oscillator 1 set and oscillator 2 set. Right? So that is controlled from here. We just set that oscillator mode. And there's also a drum mode too. If you wanted to build a drum kit out, there are actually some really good drum sounds in here. I'm not going to cover that today, but let's just focus back on this sound creation. So let's start with just a single oscillator here. And there's a very important concept to understand in the Korg Triton, and that is this concept of a high and a low sound. So over on the right here in oscillator 1, you'll see this high and low. And basically what we can do is, based on the velocity that I play my keyboard, a different sound can play. So it can be the sound associated with the low or the high. So to illustrate this, my high sound is a piano. I'm going to change my low sound. Let's come into our sample browser. Let's just change this to a detuned super. If I play my keyboard below 50 velocity, or I'm sorry, above 50 velocity, we're going to get that high sound. If I play it below, we get that low sound. So if you're a very expressive piano player or keyboard player, this is a great way to kind of blend sounds together in a single oscillator mode. Now, most patches in the Korg Triton just have this set to 1, so basically everything you play is going to play that high sound. So if you want just a general tip here, you're not an expressional piano player, keep this velocity at 1 and just set the high sound. So let's go to the Easy tab here, and we'll see again we're in oscillator 1. There's that high and low. Let's say I want to change the sound. I don't like the piano. I can click this drop down here, which will then take me to the sample browser. So as you can see, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of different sounds within here. And this is a rompler, right? So the oscillator are basically samples that you can then manipulate through traditional synthesis technique. I have a category tab here, so if I want a very specific type of sound, it's easy to quickly filter this down. So for example, if I just want a synth wave, I can click on one of these and it will automatically slot that sound in, so I can essentially audition it from here, but not commit it. Let's use that detune super. So we have changed the oscillator. Now, the next thing I want to do is come to the filter here, and we'll see the filter. We have a low pass filter or a low pass and high pass filter. So you can use either one of those types. Let's use the low pass, and we can hold here and drag it out or increase the resonance. I'm going to go ahead and open that up all the way. And then we have the filter envelope right here. In that filter envelope, we can see the intensity it's being applied to the filter cutoff. So if I set this to 0, it won't affect that filter cutoff and the filter will just stay in place. Over here, I have the amp envelope for my sound, so I can sculpt how that sound comes in and how it comes out. So if I wanted to make a pad, pretty basic, right? Then I can control my pitch. Pitch envelope intensity if I wanted to modulate that, portamento. And then I also have the volume for this oscillator. So if I wanted to drop the volume of just this oscillator, I could do that, and I can even pan it. And pro tip, if you change a value here, just hold Alt, double click, it'll reset it to the middle. Now, some other things I can do from here, let's go back to oscillator and enable double. And now we have two sounds stacked up. We have this oscillator 1 set and oscillator 2. And as I showed earlier, I can modify each set independently. So oscillator 2 can have different filters, amp envelopes, different panning. And then maybe I also want to mess with the effects here. So I can come down and you'll see I have 5 effect slots and then 2 master effect slots. So let's say we don't like this graphic EQ. I can come in and then maybe just do a stereo chorus. And then I also have a master EQ here. This will apply to the entire program itself. So if I wanted to cut, I could come into my low setting and set that frequency where I want it, and then do a cut or a gain addition. Maybe I wanted to add some more high end. Very easy to do. Now, I can come through if I want to go even deeper than the level we're at now, right? I could come into each of these sub tabs and play around with these different elements. So if I wanted to mess with that filter a little more And then I have my effect settings here. So if I want to go in and mess with my effects very specifically, so we slotted a chorus into IFX1, I can go into IFX1 and have access to more controls for that specific effect. And if I come back to the routing here, what I can do is use one or all of these different IFX slots, and then I can chain them into each other. So I have the stereo chorus, which then feeds into the reverb. I could then feed this into IFX3 and put a delay in there and then send that to the master. And then everything comes out and goes into the master effects here, where I could then chain these two together and either feed MFX1 into MFX2 or the reverse. And then I can decide how much of that I want to send out to the master. A lot of really great effects in here, and as you can see, you can build up some great chains within here. Last thing I'm going to peek at is the arpeggiator here, which the Triton has a really powerful one. So I can enable this by clicking enable, or at the top here, I can simply click this to enable it wherever I want. And you'll see we are synced to my DAW's BPM, which we set in that global setting area. Now, with the arpeggiators, you have a ton of different patterns within here that you could utilize, all sorts of really cool things. Right, I can change my octave range, my resolution, the gate, velocity. I can latch it, sync it to keys, right? All those typical things you'd expect. And then you also have a pattern editor where you can come in and further tweak your arpeggiator. So the arpeggiator is really powerful in here, a great way to get some really unique sounds out of the Korg Triton. Now let's say I like this patch, I want to save it. I'm going to come up to the top and click write, and we're now in write program mode. So I can come in, give it a name. I can give it a category for filtering down the line. So you can set all these different settings here. And then you select one of the user banks that you want to put it in. Let's put it in user bank D and just slot it in number 6. And then we click write. So if I go to browse, I go to user, I go to user bank D. There's our patch right there. I'm going to go ahead and favorite it. Now let's take a look at the combination mode here, which is, as we talked about earlier, a collection of up to 8 different programs. Really powerful feature in the Korg Triton. So what I'm going to do is create a blank combination here. So I'm going to go to user bank D, and just load up an initial combination. Now what I want to do is load different programs into these different slots. So let's start with slot 1 here. We click this arrow and then go load program, and it will open the load program browser here, which looks identical to the browser we looked at earlier, because it basically is. The difference here is that we're slotting programs into the combination. So maybe I want to start with a slow synth. So we have a slow synth loaded in, and I'm actually going to come in and boost. So now what I want to do is load in another sound. So let's go into slot 2 and load program, and let's just do a motion synth here. And I can't really hear this second patch because that first program is playing. So I'm going to go ahead and solo just the second patch so I hear just this sound. I kind of like that, so let's go ahead and load that in. Now, I could keep going from here, but I want to call out a few things. One is if I select each program I loaded, you'll see over on the right, I can modify that individual program like we showed in program mode. So I can still change these programs within the context of the COMBI mode, which is really powerful. But how do we work with all of these different programs together? Well, if we come over first, let's just look at volume. So for each program, I can change the volume. I can solo, mute different parts within here, and then I can even copy. So if I wanted to copy this first program or a piece of it into a different slot, I could do that very easily. But the real fun is when I click this COMBI button here, and now I get some settings for the combination. And these correlate from left to right all the way across. So if I select program 2 and slot 2 here, directly across are the settings for that specific program within the COMBI. So I could turn it off, I could turn it back on, I can pan. I can come in and set that program to play in what it's defined as in the program itself, or I can set it to poly, mono, or legato. So let's say I want to play a chord with the first program, but just single notes with the second. I could set that second program to mono, and so it won't play a chord even though I play a chord on my keyboard. Then some other settings here I can quickly transpose. Now let's go to the MIDI screen here. This is likely a channel or a page you'll never mess with. Basically what I can do is set each program in the combination to a different MIDI channel. So if I wanted to use this VST as a multi-timbral synth, I could do that. The next thing here is zone, and I can set each program to only be triggerable, if that's even a word, in different zones on my keyboard, kind of similar to a sampler. This may be useful for you, again, if you're a person who can actually play piano and is very expressive. You may want a bass sound on your lower keys, and then maybe a string on your higher keys. This is where you could define those key and velocity zones. Now, another thing to call out here is the IFX. So if I go to IFX here, we have a similar routing structure to the pages we just looked at, but your IFX slots are the same as in program mode. So you have up to 5 IFX slots you can use in your 2 MFX slots. However, for each program, we can send it to a very specific IFX bus. So program 1 is set to go to IFX 1, which is not enabled. Let's go ahead and enable it and just add, let's do a chorus. So I could send this second program to the same IFX slot. But what I'm actually going to do is send it to IFX 3. Let's enable IFX 3 and put a delay. So we have 2 programs in this COMBI. One is going to a chorus, one is going to a delay. And then we could enable our MFX, put a big reverb on here, send that out to the master. And then like before, you have a master EQ here that affects the entire COMBI. Now, another thing we can do here is use dual arpeggiators. And so to illustrate this, let's actually load up a lead sound. And then let's set that lead sound to play in mono. And let's pan it to the left a little bit. And then let's come to our ARP here, and let's go ahead and turn it on. And then let's go to ARP up here, and you'll see for each program, we can send it to ARP A or ARP B, and each ARP can play a different pattern, which is really cool. Now, I only want to send this lead to the arpeggiator, so I'm going to send it to A. We can see A right here. We can turn it on, and it will start playing through that arpeggio. So let's change the resolution and the pattern. I don't know why it's not letting me select that specific pattern. Let's see if we can figure it out here. Let's just go. Let's try again. There we go. And that is really the power of the combination mode. So I could keep going from here. For example, I could come in and load some drums. And I could send the drums to ARP B. We can enable ARP B. And then we could come. Let's see if we get a little drum pattern. We do. And that's kind of it, folks. Same thing for saving. Let's say we like this COMBI. I'm going to go to write. We can name it sit COMBI, save it to whatever bank we want, and we're good to go. Couple other quick things I want to call out here. And one is the real-time controls at the top here. So if we right click, we can assign these to the different values you see within here, or even some MIDI CC values. So for example, if I wanted to assign this to master volume, I could. And then I could assign this other one to panning. And then in something like Bitwig, right, I could come in, add an LFO, and modulate that button. Gotta love it, brother. Other thing I want to call out here too is just this menu button here. Anytime I can initialize a preset, just click it like that, and it'll set it to the init patch. I can change the screen size here very easily, right? Change it back to whatever I want. And then I can also access the plugin manual or the original manual from here. And final thing I'll call out is this little button at the top here. If I click this, I can emulate, I think it's different DAC modes in the Triton. I'll be honest, I haven't noticed much of a difference with these, so hey man, maybe good for you. Anyways, folks, that is kind of my super high-level overview of the Korg Triton. Really just amazing synth. I have a hardware unit, the rack version, next to me all decked out. Probably one of my favorite synths and romplers of all time. Really just a culmination of all the Korg romplers from the 90s. Anyways, hope that was helpful. If you're thinking about picking up a Korg Triton, just do it. $100. Can't go wrong.